listening to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something, people. I posted my 800th episode the other day. 800. And what's amazing about that is I had Andrew Ferris from INXS, and he was a co-composer of all their songs. He was a founding member. And I saw INXS in Philadelphia years ago. And I remember driving home, and I was wearing leather pants. It was the 80s, I'm not going to lie. And driving home, I wrapped my Fiero exactly, around a telephone pole. Anyway, we have a great show today. My guest, such a great actor. He was on a little over 6 years ago, and since then, I've relocated back to New Jersey. He's not where he used to be. I think he lived on a vineyard when he was on my show last time. And my guest is Reed Diamond. How you doing, Reed?
Oh, my God. It's so good to be here, buddy. Just in that first 1 minute, there's so much to unpack. First of all, if you're only as hip as your guest, I feel terrible. I feel there's a lot of pressure on me. I wish I was more hip, and I'm going to try to be as hip and reflect as much hipness as possible. And then rubber pants.
Leather.
Oh, my God. You know, it sounded like rubber. And I thought, oh, that's genius, because you went to a concert and you need rubber pants in case you don't want to have to make your way to the restroom. You can have a couple of extra beers and you've got your rubber pants ready to go.
Exactly. Now,
yeah, exactly.
Now, what happened? You were in a vineyard, which is great. And now Toronto's a great city. My roommate from college designs all the inside of a lot of the Asian restaurants in there. His name's Bennett Lowe, and he says Toronto is so hip. But what happened? How does this whole change?
Well, dude, I mean, obviously, I got tired of drinking so much wine. Which is really, on one level, it isn't in the top 20 reasons I didn't mean to get an email during that. I feel like the worst person ever. It's not the top reason that we moved here, but when you live in wine country and all of your friends make wine and all of your friends have extraordinary cellars, you tend to drink a lot of wine. And, so we moved to Canada for the beer. Because they're known for their beer. So we came up here for beer. No, it was 7 years in paradise. We were in the Santa Ynez Valley, Los Olivos, the wine country outside of Santa Barbara, where the movie Sideways was shot. Right, and it was great. Made lifelong friends. It was really, it was a very simple reason we moved. My daughter had gotten to a certain age. My wife had grown up in Toronto. I grew up in New York City. And we just wanted to give her some urban city life, and Toronto seemed like the right place to go. It was it's the most multicultural city in North America, possibly, I've heard, claimed in the world. So it's a great, vibrant city. I fell in love with my wife here. That's where we courted, and so every time I come back here, when I've been here, because I've been here a few times for work since my wife and I first met 18 years ago, but I sort of do the Stations of the Cross of our romantic rendezvous spots, all of our favorite restaurants, and many of them are still here. But we wanted to give our daughter a little city life, and because she'd basically been a country girl. We lived on a ranch surrounded by vineyards, and I wanted her to get a little of that grit. We wanted her to be a little more streetwise, but I didn't want to go back to Manhattan just because it just seemed too overwhelming. So and in Canada, everyone's, as they say, 15% nicer. So it's the New York City, but 15% nicer.
Well, it must be great for you, because you are an accomplished actor, that you don't have to live in L.A. anymore. I mean, there's something that, with everyone doing with taped auditions. How has that changed for you? And do you like the in-person audition or the taped audition? And I'm sure you get a ton of offers, but what do you find better?
That's a very prescient question at the moment, because I just before I got on the Zoom with you, I just put an audition on tape. Now it's interesting because we live in very interesting and strange times. So things had already changed so much, right, with how the business was working, because everything was going to self-tape, and you could live pretty much anywhere. And I think that also influenced some of our. I mean, that was the reason we moved initially up to wine country. Is I go, as long as I'm close to an airport, I can kind of live anywhere I want. I want my family to be happy. And yeah, there certainly, I was lucky enough to get offers, but then, you have to audition, and the self-tape thing is, it's an interesting monster, because, when you go into the room, And you're really only going to do it once or twice. You get to meet the people and you get the vibe off the people. I mean, certainly if you ask me which I prefer, I certainly prefer going into a room because it's a great way to sort of sniff each other out in some sort of, primitive feral way where you know if you want to work with each other, you can also interact. And if they want to see something differently or you want to try something different, the room is great. But the only thing, but it's self-taping is interesting. I think the only problem is if you have any sort of perfectionism in you, you can lose your mind because, as I said, I tweeted this, I posted, I go, auditioning is, we want you to paint a room several weeks from now, so we'd like you to prove that you can do it by painting an entire house tomorrow at noon. Right. And so auditioning is a very strange process because there's no other, it's not commensurate to anything you're really going to do on set in a certain way. And in fact, I was thinking about people who say, oh, I love auditioning. Fuck you. If you love, you're the guy who said, hey, I'm sorry, the bell rung at 3. You go, you didn't sign any homework. I love auditioning. No one loves auditioning. Who wants to be, who wants to be judged? But doing it home, you have a little more control. But I always find the odd thing, and this is very inside baseball, but the thing that I always find odd about auditioning is if I'm on set and you and I are shooting a scene, we're going to do it a couple of times. It's going to be cut. So if on take 3, the way this moment happened was really fascinating, we'll cut that one in, then we'll cut in the beginning from take 2. Almost never are you going to have to do an entire scene in one take pretty much without moving and get it perfect from A to Z. And if you care about getting it perfect, because you get to have to watch yourself back, that can be daunting. I think it's more, I have to spend a lot more time on just self-love and getting the acting right? Because it's funny, you would think that we're all narcissists in this business, but I mean, I feel like I'm low on the narcissism scale for actors, and I don't enjoy looking at myself over and over and over again. Fortunately, my wife's an incredibly talented actor. But at the same time, it's a dual-edged sword because she's incredibly demanding. I actually, since I've met her, I really feel like I only act for one person. I act for my wife. So if she's like thumbs up or thumbs down, I know if I did it. But when I'm home auditioning with her, sometimes I'll start getting in my head. I go, she hates it. She's going to leave me, right? So that's just a nice little journey into the psychology of Reed Diamond.
Well, it's funny you say that because, like me, I'll post a lot of jokes, and I'll say to my wife, I'll go, Joanne, was that funny? She's and I'm like, what do you mean it's not funny? I'm telling you it's funny. And she's like, I go, I'm putting it up. And she goes, did you get any likes? I go, no. She goes, I told you it's not funny.
Oh, well, we picked good women for, we were smart guys, right? And you want, that's the one person's approval that I want more than anything. Now, where are you in New Jersey?
I'm 10 minutes outside Philadelphia, Marlton, New Jersey, right next to Cherry Hill, where I grew up. And I moved back 3 years ago, and I just had to get out of L.A. L.A. is just, and you've been, I was there for 20 years. I remember, and I told this last time, I remember I waited on you at Gordon Bier's restaurant. You were with like a few other people.
I remember, yes.
And you used to come in there a lot. And I remember I was like,
there,
yeah, it's Reed Diamond. And I knew who you were. And you were very nice. You were very, and the thing is though, I've interviewed a lot of actors, and not one has been a jerk. Not one jerk.
Yeah. There's I think, it's always the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But in my experience, there's a lot more. That's one of the perks of this job is that you get to be around so many funny, intelligent, cool, creative people. So yeah, there's definitely more awesome people than jerks. There's a few jerks, but the jerks make the best stories. That's the problem. It's not. It's like, oh, Reed Diamond, he was nice to me. He was really nice when he came into Gordon Biersch. He had a couple of Marzens and the sausage, and he tipped 25%. But if I'd thrown something at you and told you you're a fucking moron, and my sausage is cold and sent it back, I go, you call that a kielbasa? And then these onion rings are soggy. And then it would be more interesting at a cocktail party.
Now, and don't mention a name, but
Okay.
have you ran into any real jerks on this set? And you don't mention the show, don't mention the name unless you want to.
I have had the good fortune to work with some of the best jerks on the planet. And in the old days, it felt like, I always think there's two ways that people approach work and approach life. And the one is like the rising tide lifts all boats, where, hey, we're all in this together. The better I make you look, the better you are. The more supported, the more comfortable you feel as my partner in the scene or castmate or whatever, that we're all going to rise together. And then there are the actors who definitely think, hey, I'm going to look better by making you look worse. And once again, they make for great stories. I have, but it's fascinating because it's funny thing, it's very kind of you to say that I was nice, when we didn't know each other, but I think what I've learned over time in this business is whoever you truly are is going to come out. So if you're an asshole, you can pretend to be a nice guy for a while. You can try it, but everyone's going to know. But I tried. Conversely, I was on a show a long time ago with some really very difficult personalities, and I won't name names, but world class. Some of the best scene-stealing, mess you up during a take, selfish actors on the planet. And I thought, oh, man, I was young. I go, I'm going to try to be an asshole. So I really tried. I thought, okay, I'm going to study what they do because this seems very effective. And I just couldn't pull it off because it has to be part of your nature, I was terrible at it. And I think it was funny. I did a show for a long time that was a very creative and a beautiful show, and just amazing scripts, and one of the greatest shows of my life. But it was a very difficult shooting process, and it was a lot of problematic, at the time, personalities everywhere. And I remember being told that was sort of the secret sauce, that conflict, the real life conflict, created on-screen brilliance. And I went off to do the pilot of S.H.I.E.L.D. And my buddy Clark Johnson, who directed, who'd been my partner on Homicide, he played Meldrick, and he's directing S.H.I.E.L.D. And I remember I show up to we're doing the pilot episode of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the scripts are really good, but I go, everyone's really nice and everyone's getting along so well. I go, this show's gonna fail. And then I watched the first, and then I watched it. I go, oh no, everyone can get along and make a great show. And since then, I've had more amazing experiences than bad, and certainly I feel, someone wiser than me said, you cut the path through, the way you're the ship that steers through life, and the way the waters come towards you are how you go through them, right? So I certainly think that, the more present and true to myself that I am, the better I get in return. But I always think, early on I worked with some big name actors when I first started, and some of them were wonderful, but some were horrible, where they wouldn't say hello, good morning, just you do a 4-week shoot and you barely get through a hi. But I remember I got cast in Good Night and Good Luck that George Clooney was directing. I hadn't met him, and I show up on the CBS Radford lot, and he runs into me on the lot, and he just runs up to me and he grabs me in a big hug and he goes, Reed, I'm so glad you're doing this movie. Now, that was all it took. I was like, I would have taken San Juan Hill for him. Anything he wanted from that moment on, and that's a trick. And so the menchiest people I've worked with since then are Brad Pitt or George. There's something about their magnanimity that brings out the best in other people, and they can't manufacture that. They're good people, but I've definitely worked with some world-class jerks. I remember one of my first jobs. It was a TV show. It was one of my first TV gigs, and the lead actor, right before, I'm playing sort of a gritty New York City cab driver. And he goes, you remind me of someone. And I go, okay. He goes, it's going to come to me. So now I'm already in my head during the take. And he goes, yeah, you remind me of someone. Do another take. And then he goes, oh, I know who you remind me of. You remind me of Leslie Howard. Do you know who Leslie Howard was? Right. I go, oh, I remind you of sort of a fey British actor from the 30s, right? So I was like, and then he knew what he was doing. So now I'm like Leslie Howard. I'm trying to be a cab driver, and he thinks I'm like Leslie Howard. But no, I've had many, many, many more good experiences.
Now, I want to ask you. I'm trying to think what the set was like. D.B. Sweeney was on a few weeks ago, and he said Memphis Belle.
I love D.B.
He said, he stayed with Carrie Connick. And everyone else stayed. But what was that like? Because that was an early job in your career. But you look at the cast now, all you guys have worked forever. But what was it like having all that testosterone, acting insecurity, and vanity in one place, and you're in another country to boot?
It's so great. I keep following DB onto these shows. I just followed him on another one a couple weeks ago. Memphis Belle was my big break. It was my first movie. I'm still in drama school. I was so excited and so intimidated. I'm working all of those actors, Eric Stoltz and DB. I was huge fans of theirs. And I remember the first week we got to London. I flew over with DB and Harry, and they were very nice to me, but I was super intimidated. I remember for the first week I barely spoke, which used to be my old method of starting something. My terror would sort of take over, and then of course he couldn't shut me up after a week. But we went to boot camp. Did he talk to you about our boot camp?
No.
So at the time, this is 1989. Now prior to this, the only other movie that had done a boot camp was Platoon. So Platoon brought the boys over, and they were in the Philippines. They had Dale Dye, who was also in the movie. He was a former Marine Corps guy. He took them through this boot camp. But our director, Michael Caton Jones, was going to build this. He was going to build this real unit. So he's going to throw us into boot camp. And part of the first week we had in London, he tried to get all of the Hollywood shit out of everybody. So I remember no one had any say in their wardrobe fitting. They were just sort of assigned their uniform as it would be. But I remember we got sent off to boot camp. So they sent us to this boot camp that had been rigged it was Fulford Manor. It was Lord Fulford. His family had been on the wrong side, I think, of the English Civil War. But it was this dilapidated, yet very grand manor house in the coast. Where were we? We're near Devon. When we were right next to where the Royal Marines trained and the SAS. And what we had about 3 ex-SAS guys and 1 Royal Marine who took us through boot camp. And I remember we had 2 by name, clearly Irish members of the cast. And I remember we were sitting down for our first meeting. They've taken us in this little part of the shtick was that there were 10 of us. They put us in this tiny van and they drove us. I remember driving past Stonehenge, whatever, when they drive us to boot camp. We first arrive at the manor house, and the Lord comes out and he's like, I know that some of you Americans have sympathies with the Irish, but we will have none of that here, right? Because it was still, those troubles were still going on, and he had been on that side. So it was funny. I'm looking at Tate Donovan and I'm looking at D.B. Sweeney's eyes. I'm like, I'm gonna kill that guy. But so they put us into this boot camp. But I think when Oliver Stone did his boot camp with Dale Dye, I think they had a real understanding that these actors were going to have to show up on set ready to work in front of a camera. These guys, these ex-SAS guys, they did not know that. So on the first day, I think, they put us through the obstacle course, and we're running, and we're swimming across a lake. And I remember DB jumped in and hit his head right there on a rock, and it swelled up like he looked like Stoltz from Mask. His head just twice its size, right? And people were getting hurt left and right. And now it was great. It was amazing because it was a perfect place to bond. It was incredibly grueling. I became best friends for life, Tate Donovan and Eric Stoltz, because we went one night on maneuvers where they broke us into 2 groups and we had to sort of fight each other. And the 3 of us shared a 1-man tent. And I remember from then on, that was it. We were friends for life. But it was bananas. And I remember we went and shot 50 caliber machine guns, the real machine guns that we were shooting in the show. But at one point, I don't know who fomented it, but we were going to do a great escape. And I remember we had plans where we were were going to steal a boat and sail up the coast of England. But I know that one night while we were doing those maneuvers, one of our cast members, who I won't mention, had siphoned off the petrol from several of the SAS guys' vehicles and made Molotov cocktails. And luckily, they caught him right before he was going to burn down Fulford Manor, because we were like, it's us against them. But a couple of people got seriously injured. I loved it. I was 21. Yeah, I was 21 years old. It was everything I wanted. I fell in love with those guys. We really did bond. It was smart directing. It made a solid group. But it was one of those experiences, for a long time, for that to be your first movie, to be 21 years old, working with actors that you think are amazing, to work at Pinewood Studios, which was my dream studio, because that's where all the James Bond movies were made, and all my favorite British movies were shot at Pinewood. So we're at Pinewood, which has such a storied history. And the most beautiful studio I've ever worked at. I haven't gotten to work in France or Italy, but compared to American studios, I remember we used to eat our lunch in this wood-paneled dining room where they'd taken all the panels off of some great ocean liner, and they have bars. Even where the crew eats where I eventually ended up eating because I'd blown all of my per diem at the nice restaurant. In the cafe where the crew eats, it's civilized, right? So you can have a pint, because that's the worst thing when you work at a U.S. studio. You always, at the end of the day, you'd love to hang out with someone, go have a drink, but you have to leave the lot because of, obviously, I think in America it has to do with liability and insurance and all that. But it was just magical, and they gave us apartments in London, and we were like the American soldiers from World War II. We were overfed, overpaid, and over there, as they said. And it was kid in a candy store, and it was I didn't make one penny on that because I spent every penny. And DB, who you brought up, tried to convince me, because it was the first job I'd ever had where they gave you per diem, which is where they give you a little bit of spending money per day, which is supposed to be what you need to live off of. And on the first night in, he set up a poker game. And I think his intention was, because I was the young guy, I was going to be the schmuck, and he was going to take me. And he tried to convince me. I remember him telling me, "Oh, this is pretend money. It's funny money. This is, you didn't have this yesterday. It doesn't matter. Just bet it." And I remember, because I didn't have much money, and I was paying my way through Juilliard at the time. I go, "Well, it seems like real money. I could spend it." And at some point, I got up. I was up. I was winning all the pots, and I didn't know all of the etiquette of poker, but I go, "Okay, I'm going to bed now." He's like, "You can't leave until," he wanted to win it back, but we stayed friends. But then he lived with Harry, and they had this amazing, I don't think anyone could have made money on that, because they had some insanely amazing townhouse in Chelsea. And I remember having a couple of wild parties at their place, but we still, to this day, we still call each other, when they call me up, they call me Hoog, because my character was Hoogesteger. So we still refer to ourselves by our character names from that movie. So it was, I think without question, it was one of the most profound and impactful experiences of my wee career.
Now, how did you get the audition in Juilliard? Because I've talked to people who've gone to USC acting school, and they don't want you to audition. It's like, you're here to learn acting. You can't audition. How did it come up with Juilliard? And then did you go back to Juilliard?
You know so much. It's a really interesting situation, because normally when you're at Juilliard or most drama schools, you're not allowed to leave. And I'd already been working I've been paying through regular college. I was paying my way. I was earning my living as an actor. But at that time, I was mostly, I would spend my summers, I would do a couple of commercials. And back in those days, those commercials made some money. There were three, maybe at the 4 networks at the time, so they'd run a lot, and you could actually make some cash. So I put myself through college, and now I was putting myself through Juilliard with commercials. And I remember I got the audition for Memphis Belle, and it was Juliet Taylor, who was Woody Allen's one of the most storied casting directors in New York. And I wanted to be part of that movie, so I remember saying to them, I did. I said when I got cast, because the movie started in the summer, but I was going to miss about 2 months of my third year, my junior year of Juilliard. I said, "Hey, I get it. If I can't come back," and they were quite gracious, and they said, "Absolutely, you can come back," which was really generous of them. And I went back. I probably shouldn't have. In retrospect, I wish I hadn't. Because I had something, I was trying to prove something. I remember I was at the end of the 4-month shoot. I finished in London on a Sunday night. I flew back that night, and Monday morning I went right back to school. And I probably should have taken a 2-week vacation, because it had been a very profound experience, and I didn't really get to process it. I certainly was like, I taught myself how to smoke for the movie. And I put myself through this smoking camp for a couple of months before I went to England, because it was great. Because it was so old school. You know, you got the script. I had the part. I think I was cast maybe 2 months before we even went over there, which was great. Because nowadays, half the time I get a job, they call me up the night before and they're, hey, can you be in New Orleans? Can you be in Atlanta? Can you be in Vancouver? And I go. But to have 2 months to prepare was amazing. But I thought, okay, I didn't smoke at the time, and I go, well, it's World War II and everyone smokes, so I'm gonna train myself to smoke. So I bought a pack of Camel filterless, and I built myself up. But I literally, like, I created a training program, like as if I had a smoking personal trainer. So on one day I would smoke 1 cigarette, and then I would build up to 2, and I'd build up to 3. And so I was building up, because I wanted to be able to smoke convincingly by the time I got there. So by the time I got there, I was addicted to cigarettes, and also I realized, oh, my character's the only character who wouldn't smoke. So my character didn't smoke on film, but now I'm just chain smoking, and so you're chain smoking. By the end of the movie, we're partying so hard because we're so young. So I should have taken a little break, but I went back to Juilliard and tried to convince my and this speaks to my self-awareness at the time. I decided, I don't want anyone to think I've gone Hollywood or I'm some big shot. So I really threw myself into the program in a way that wasn't probably true to who I was. Because the first 2 years I was at Juilliard, I really got a lot. I got so much out of it. But I also was sort of doing an a la carte approach. I go, oh, this works for me. This doesn't work for me. But when I came back, I thought, oh no, they've been so kind to allow me to leave and come back. I'm going to become the world's greatest Shakespearean actor. So I worked on just doing Shakespeare, and my voice got bigger, and we've met in person, but I'm a loud ass motherfucker. There isn't a theater. There is not a theater that I've ever been in that I couldn't be heard in. So making my voice bigger, because at the time at Juilliard, it was a very cookie cutter approach. So I had a bigger voice, and I'd warm up, and I was working on my speech, and I got bad for a while. I made myself a terrible actor for a little while, which I think is just part of the journey. And luckily, I was able to sort of put myself back together over the few years afterwards. But they were very kind to let me back to answer your question.
Now, Homicide, which I'm always bummed because you can't find that anywhere.
Like, I know, why?
It's one of those shows. I don't know. I'm sitting there because I'm like, it was so, and I watched it in and out, but now I'm not sure if I'm right on this. Did you take Polito's spot?
I didn't take anyone's spot. I mean, it could be seen that way because when I came on, I came on the year after the season directly after Polito, Beatty, and Baldwin were gone, right? So, for reasons that are interesting, and I'll allow them, well, not John, but to tell, is their time was done, and then I was sort of the first new detective to be brought on after that. But I didn't really take anyone's spot. I mean,
that's what I meant, but I know you were. Now, what was that like coming onto a show? I mean,
well, it's very interesting because now, as time has gone on, I've had a much clearer perspective on how things went down. But just to give you a little backstory, is I grew up in New York. I studied there. I was doing theater there. I did my first movies there, and then like you, I flew to Los Angeles. I remember it, January of 1992, and I get off the plane. I just finished my first Broadway show, and I'm out there, and I get off in January, and I can smell the jasmine blooming at night, and I'm going, oh, this is amazing. I'm staying. I'd only been there once before. Right after we'd finished shooting Memphis Belle, Tate said to me, hey, you got to come out and see this place. So I took my spring break from Juilliard, and I went out there, and this was really what cinched it for me, because back east, there was sort of an ethos of treating actors it was hard. It's East Coast. It's cold. It's gritty. It's gray. When you go to audition, you're treated like what are you doing here? Go wait in that room. You're next. We'll call you in when you're ready. There was a lot. There wasn't. It was. You could look at it as they're making you tough or making you tougher. But I remember I went to my first audition this spring break in Los Angeles. I'm in my rental car. I drive up to this beautiful place off of Burton Way in Beverly Hills, and I come into the beautiful building, and there's this very lovely receptionist there, and she looks my name up. She goes, "Reed, we're so glad you're here. Would you like a bottle of water?" And I go, "You're so glad I'm here?" And I knew it. She didn't mean it, right? She didn't know me, but I go, "So what if she's so glad I'm here?" She offered me water, and then I go sit over in the lovely waiting area, and then I get back after my audition. I get back into my air-conditioned car as opposed to walking 3 long blocks back to the 2 or 3 subway in the middle of August. So I already was in love with Los Angeles, even though it was insincere. I really enjoyed being spoken to like I was wanted. And when I came back in January, and I'll get back to how this came to Homicide. So I come back in January. And oh my gosh, the night jasmine's blooming, and I go, "This is heaven. I'm not leaving here," right? And I remember too, New York City was just so impossibly expensive, and I get to LA, and you can have a decent apartment because I had no money. You could buy a 6-pack for $5, and it was just a 6-pack of Budweiser for $5. It was,
You know what's funny? I used to go to the Thrifty. Because I lived in Burbank. It was a Thrifty on Olive, and they used to have a 12-pack of Molson for $7.99.
Right. Oh, no. And now, this is the inside. This is the life hack of Los Angeles. The drugstores are always the cheapest place to buy booze, and I don't know why it is, but they undersell everybody. So if you're willing to buy a name brand, and now they'll have, Sierra Nevada or whatever. But hey, Angelinos, if we're still shopping in shops, please go to the Thrifty. So I get there, and I'm in Los Angeles for a while. The LA riots of '92, they happen, and it's just a crazy time there. And I thought, and then this is interesting given where we are in the world today. And but I felt, I'm not really doing anything in the world. I want to make the world a better place. So I'm an actor. I'm a stupid actor. What's the point of? It felt at the time I had some sort of existential dilemma, and I go, this isn't really a manly pursuit. On some level, not a manly pursuit, but I mean, where I'm not really doing. I'm not giving back per se. How can I make the world safer for old ladies and kids, right? And so I had a bunch of friends who were cops in LA, and I talked to them about it, and so they took me to the academy, and then I went on a ride along in Watts, and then long story short, all the cops I met, they all wanted to be actors because it was LA, of course, and I realized, I'm an actor. It's my form of expression. But I go, I'd love to truthfully, and I think that's key now, portray one on film. Blah blah blah. Cut to a few years later. I'm sitting in a Vancouver hotel room. I'm shooting a pilot, and I see the first episode of Homicide come on TV. And I was a huge fan of the truthful cop genre. I mean, Sidney Lumet's probably my most favorite director, right? And you're just thinking when you look at Prince of the City and Serpico, which are very prescient movies right now, Dog Day Afternoon, some of my favorite movies, and I'm watching Homicide. I'm going, here's some of the most incredible actors, and they're telling this story in a unique way, which is, those of us who were there at the time, like you can remember there was no HBO. There was no basic cable TV shows. This was NBC taking a risk and making a very honest show that would only be on HBO or Netflix or AMC now. And I go, I want to be on that show. I'm going to be on that show. So a couple years later, I get the audition. It was one scene. It was a great scene, interrogation scene for Homicide. And I remember going, if they want a blonde, blue-eyed guy for this part, I'm going to get it. Because at the time, it was 1994, 95. Every single job I went up for, the description and the breakdown said we want a Johnny Depp type. A Johnny Depp type. And I was like, I was the antithesis of a Johnny Depp type. And so I was like, oh, please. But they cast me. Now, I think in retrospect, I think they cast me thinking that they were going to, I was going to be the 90210-ish eye candy, maybe sex up the show a little bit. Unfortunately, I had an ulterior motive, which was to be in my own Sidney Lumet movie and play this character as realistically as possible. It's because I remember when I first showed up, they're like, "You're a frat boy with a gun." I'm like, "I don't know," and I don't know if. And so I fought for no smoochy, none of that, and I wanted to really, because this guy, he really imploded. He as a character, which was to they're amazing writers, and to their credit, David Simon and Tom Fontana, who I just adore. And so I think at first they thought, oh, we're going to put him in a lot of kissy scenes, and he's going to get a girl, and he's going to bring some sex appeal. And then I just wanted to play the sort of damaged cop who's trying to deal with his own personality and deal with the world. And that's what it ended up becoming. So we ended up being on the same page, but I think that was not the reason I was invited originally to join the show.
Now, you're the blonde, blue eye, the eye candy, the 21 Jump Street with an edge. How in your career, because you've acted for so long, how has your career arc gone in your eyes on roles that you get or audition for?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because what happens is there's certain ways that people see you when you keep getting typecast and you play those characters over and over again. And then there's certain sort of just periods that the TV or film goes through where those are the shows that are out there. But I remember right before I got Homicide, I was at a management company, and the head of the management company brings me into her office. She goes, "What's going on? Why aren't you going? I sent you this thing. You didn't want to go in it." And I go, "I don't want to play kissy face. I don't want to play the boyfriend anymore. I want to play, I want to be a cop." She's like, "You're going to do more kissy face. No one's going to give you a gun." And then, so I get on Homicide. And then after that, I just play cops for a few years, right? Play cops, and then as I got a little older, I switched to playing FBI agents, right? And then, or lawyers. But so then once you've played something and people are offering you stuff, you're going to just play a variation on that character. So after Homicide, lots of cops, lots of FBI agents. And then when you want to change it up, you're going to have to audition. You're going to have to show them that you can do something else, even though maybe you had done it prior. You'd been that character. You'd played. I mean, I started in comedy. Comedy was my thing, and then I started getting cast in dramas, and I go, well, this is just easier. And then people are like, oh, you're the drama guy. But at first, no one thought I was the drama guy. So it's interesting how the world perceives you, and then you have these moments where you go, okay, I really need to fight for something or show you that I'm different. But I remember it was getting pretty boring. That wasn't getting boring, but I was playing a lot of lawyers and a lot of supportive spouses and stuff. But as soon as my hair went silver, as soon as the silver came into my hair, I got a brand new burst of casting, because suddenly I was the bad guy. And I could play, as soon as that little silver went in there, I started playing villains, which was artistically amazing. Right? It was career choice wise terrible, because all villains get killed. So you have no job security whatsoever. So you're going to die. Hopefully you make it through the season. You don't always make it through the season. But once the silver went into my hair, it really opened up a whole new world of bad guys or evil white guys. And then, because in the old days I used to say, I'm the guy. When I first came to LA, I did a lot of TV movies. And I played two variations. I either played the bad guy who you think is the good guy, like he's a bad kid, or the guy who thinks the bad guy who turns out to have a heart of gold. At the end, Tori Spelling isn't sure about me because I drive a motorcycle, but at the end, I'm going to save her from the murderer, right? And we'll have a big smooch. But when the silver came in, things got interesting again. And the last 12 years of my career have been probably some of the most interesting, and the things that get offered to me. And now that there's no shortage of evil white guys in the world, I feel like I have some job security, because there's always some horrible senator or head of a corporation to play. But it does. You go through stages. I've been really lucky in the last few years. I was doing a lot of network television and I started working with a beautiful new manager, and we said, hey, let's really fight for some of this cable stuff, because that's what I want to do. Because I feel like there's two roles, there's two types of things that you play. We may have talked about this before, but I feel there's two roles you're given. You're either going to play a part where I go, I hope I can make it good, or you go, I hope I'm good enough. And it's always more exciting to, as an artist, to play the or an actor. Artist. Look at me, I'm all highfalutin. As an actor, it's always interesting where the challenge, where you get a little butt sweat, a little butterflies the night before. You're going, I hope I really can fulfill how great this part is and really what the writer's intent is. But we made a conscious decision to really focus on those parts. In the last few years, I've been really lucky to work on Netflix and AMC and multi-layered characters and characters that have even the Purge on USA. It was such a interesting character in the way he was written, and there were levels to explore, and you're working with tremendous actors and directors, and on the Terror, the second season of the Terror, that was exciting. And I've just finished the 13 Reasons Why, this final season of that, and that's a really nuanced, interesting character, and it's great writing, and you're surrounded by just amazing actors of all ages.
What's it like to be on a show like 13 Reasons Why? Because it really made an impact. It was one of those shows that, when you're a Franklin and Bash, people are going to recognize you for that,
right.
Like, the jerky lawyer,
Right.
But for what the 13 Reasons is, it's people really have noticed that show, and it's hard hitting. What's that like for an actor to be involved in a project like that?
Well, before I could tell you that, it just reminded me that my stock character for the last 10 years, because you just brought up Franklin and Bash, I played the likable asshole. That's how I go, oh, is there a likable asshole? I'll be the likable asshole. I'm an asshole, but you like me because I'm a likable guy. But yeah, so likable asshole was that was my stock in trade. But no, 13 Reasons Why, it was I remember when the meeting came up, and I hadn't seen the show, and I now, because of streaming, and we're so lucky, I just popped in the first few episodes, and I was just blown away by the acting and the writing. And so I go, I just want to be part of this show. I want to play in this sandbox with these people. I think as far as the impact of the show and the heaviness of, it's heavy. It's a heavy show. It was hard for me to read those scripts. Traditionally, I'll read a script, even the scenes that I'm not in. I'll read it many times to get a sense of what's going on. I do, it's not just my line, bullshit. But those were heavy, and it would be, I could really read the whole script once or twice, and then it was gutting. Even when I watch it, I can only do a couple at a time before I have to sort of process it and move on. But as far as acting on it, I've been really lucky. I've worked now on that and a couple of these last few shows I've done. I work with young actors, and there's so many good young actors out there, which gives me, I'm so profoundly optimistic about the future of this business, because I'm working with these people in their 20s and their late teens who know who they are, who come ready to work, who are just lovely. So it's been as I've become the older actor, because one day you wake up, for years I was the kid, I was the youngest, I was the second youngest on Memphis Belle after Sean, and everything, I'd be the new kid, and then one day you're like, hey, I'm the old guy. Now, and then people want to hear your stories, and they all become much more interesting when you tell them, like, oh, wow, this is like me talking to Malcolm McDowell and asking him questions. You think I have to, someone will go, hey, blah, 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 they'll tell you a story, and then you hear the whole table go silent as you're talking. You're like, oh, I've reached that position. I guess I have to pick up the check.
Now, you mentioned Malcolm McDowell. That was in Franklin and Bash, and you worked with Ray Seahorn, who's going on to, be on Better Call Saul. But I saw when I was going on IMDb, I didn't know you were on Good Girl Revolt.
Right. I was on that, and those are all Franklin and Bash tie-ins. I mean, with Ray, she deserves everything that's ever happened to her, because I remember her on Franklin and Bash just coming into she was playing the district attorney, and the detail of her work, I still, and we're friends, and I've seen her. In fact, I saw her on the set. She was hanging out on the set of Good Girls Revolt because she was going to direct. I think later in the season if they'd gone to a second season. But she's such a brilliant acting teacher, and she's really studied. So I always love her insights on how I love watching her work. I love working with her. I'm intimidated. I want to try to be one day as good as she is. And then Malcolm McDowell's, it's very rare that you get to, if you told the 16-year-old me that I'm going to work with Malcolm McDowell, I never would have believed you. I mean, it was a dream come true. I mean, I was a huge fan, and he couldn't have been more of a menschy mensch to me. And he's the most wrong human being that I've ever encountered, and I love that. And he's old school, and he's English, and he only tells you he loves you through deep insults. And I respond to that quite well. I'm used to that, so I don't mind that at all. But Good Girls Revolt, that was because Dana Calvo wrote that, and she's part of the Franklin and Bash. Kevin Falls, who created Franklin and Bash, also created this show Journeyman, which was one of the greatest experiences of my TV life. And Dana was a writer on that, and then she was a writer on Franklin and Bash, and then she asked me to come play the dad to Anna on Good Girls Revolt, and that's exciting. It was great to do period pieces, but I did permanently damage myself because I did about 3 period pieces in a row where I had to smoke again. So I'm just smoking, and there's nothing like smoking on camera because it is the best prop. But in real life, you have one cigarette. In the last 15-20 minutes, you may have another one, but here you're having one cigarette every take, and it's such a good punctuation for a scene. So I think I gave myself some sort of permanent sinus trouble, but it was worth it for that part.
Now, why was The Journeyman one of your best experiences in TV?
Because it brings us round to how we started about talking about working with people and great people. Kevin Falls, one of the greatest showrunners. He is the menschiest mensch, and he has a philosophy of no assholes anywhere. And I've never worked on a show where everyone is just the best and happy to be there. And I can't tell you what a different environment that's like. But that was another funny one. That was like the Homicide one where I've been waiting for years to do it because my wife and I have been huge fans of Rome, where Kevin McKidd was the star, right? And the first time we'd ever seen Kevin McKidd. And every time we'd watch Rome, Marnie would turn to me and she goes, "You guys need to play brothers. You should play." For 2 years, we're going, I'm play Kevin McKidd's brother. And I remember when the call came in to have the meeting with Kevin for Journeyman, they go, "Hey, it's to play Kevin McKidd's brother." I go, and he's a cop. I'm getting this one. And then it was a perfect experience. It was one of those where cast all fell in love. We fell in love with the writers and the directors, and we just had a bond. And we felt it's what you get into this for. It's, I came from the theater. You love ensemble. You want to create a little group, a little tribe, and be in it together. I remember I think they intentionally set it in San Francisco so we could just go up there and shoot location stuff in San Francisco, and we'd be working our butt off shooting all day. And Alex Graves, our director par excellence, would while we're shooting, he would already have made the dinner plans to where we're going that night, and we'd have an incredible meal, and we'd all drink hard and eat well, and then still be up at 4:00 in the morning ready to go. And it was one of those where if that show had gone for 7 years, it would have been a dream come true. Unfortunately, it went the first 13 episode, and luckily the first 13 order, and luckily that the writer's strike happened, and because Kevin is so organized, such a great writer, he had all the scripts written, so we were able to finish our order, which a lot of shows didn't get to do. But I'll never forget the last night we'd taken a trailer and we'd filled one half of it. We turned it into a bar, and we're filming our last scenes because we know this is the last night. We kind of know that this is probably the end. So we'd shoot a scene, then we'd go into the room, we'd cry and drink and hug each other, tell each other how much we loved each other. And we've all stayed really great friends since then. So that's why it's special. That's why Journeyman was. I love that character. I love those people, and those are because that's why I got into TV. I mean, TV's really changed since I'd made a choice to transition because when I first came out to Los Angeles, doing TV was really frowned upon because I thought, I'm going to only do theater and have a film career, and at some point I started seeing, there's great TV. I'm going to do TV, and then TV became what it is now, where it's the go-to spot. But when I first started, it was still mostly network television. So you're doing 22 episodes a year. So that's 9 months out of your year. You're you're with a family. It's having a proper job. And now that's really changed with the cable model where you're doing 10 episode seasons and then you may have a year off in between. But it's still, that's the goal, is to have a place that you love showing up every day where you feel safe enough to do creative work and really shine and help other people shine.
Now, you were on 24, and then you were on Designated Survivor, both Kiefer Sutherland. Was that the reason you were on them, or was there a connection, or had you known each other before you did 24?
Am I the Kiefer whisperer?
Yeah.
No, it was like, no, well, Kiefer and I have a long history as well. He and I were both apprentices at Williamstown Theater Festival up in Massachusetts, which is this well-known summer stock theater. And apprentice means you basically pay a certain amount of money for them to put you up, and you do all the work. You build all the sets and you tear them all down, and it was great. But we were apprentices together, so we kind of knew each other then. And the next time I saw him, I remember seeing him was at one of those beautiful wood paneled bars at Pinewood. He was shooting a movie there, and he's out there at lunchtime just swirling a little brown liquor in a nice little glass. And then the next time I saw him was 24. I've been lucky enough to work with Kiefer on 24 and Designated, which we shot up here. Designated, we shot up here in Toronto, because he's the smartest, and he's probably the smartest actor I've ever worked with. That guy is, and he suffers no fools. So it's a great set to be on. He keeps it nice and crispy. Everyone needs to bring their A game because he demands a lot from everyone around him, which can be daunting, but I love it. I like when things get crispy on set. I like when everyone feels a little, feels compelled to bring their A game. 24 was one of those amazing experiences where I always thought these shows were planned out. I figured they had all 24 hours and they knew what they were going to do. You got 24 hours. You know what each hour contains. But it was one of those where they'd run out. They played so many times. I've come on a show where it's going to be one episode and then I end up staying for 2 or 3 seasons, right? And that's the gift also of TV. If sometimes they don't have a plan necessarily, or they have a plan and it's come to fruition earlier than they thought. So on that 24, I wanted to be on that show for years, and their offices were out in Chatsworth, and you know where Chatsworth is, but Chatsworth is it's the farthest northwest corner of LA,
and the
right?
porn capital.
I was going to say, it's the porn capital. It's also where Roy Rogers had his studio in his house. He had all those little rocks out there. And you can still, some people, I remember I had a friend who worked on my computer, who lived out in one of those neighborhoods at Roy Rogers where they have like the little mining cart that he left there from his shooting days. But you'd have to make the schlep out to Chatsworth to meet with those guys. I was like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. And then one day they called up and like, hey, do you want to come on 24? And you're going to play President Logan's assistant. And Gregory Itzin, and I loved him, and we just had so that was great. I was playing this character, and we were trying to figure out if I'm a bad guy or a good guy, and then suddenly they played out their first idea, so suddenly I became the big bad guy, which is always, it's these gifts. I mean, it's funny, you're talking about working with people and how and choices you make and shows you're on. I certainly have found I've gotten the most in my career out of saying yes, because you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes you say yes to something and you go, it was okay. I did my best. It didn't turn out great. But oftentimes you say yes, and it so far exceeds what you thought your experience was going to be. When I met Joss Whedon for Dollhouse, I think that character was just in the pilot. And the first episode, Lawrence Dominic, the head of security, and they call me up. They go, hey, do you want to just do this one scene part in the pilot? And I go, yeah, hell yeah, I want to work with Joss so bad. I'm a huge fan. And then we just hit it off, and we found something in that moment. And I think at the end, we just finished shooting the scene. It was a 3-hour scene, and he'd already taken me on a whole tour of the set, and we bonded. And then they said to me, okay, we'll see you when we come back. And that wasn't the plan. And then I was there for the rest of that season, and then came back and I was part of the stable and got to be in Much Ado. And then I, because of that show, Marissa and Jed, who created Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Joss, they invite me to come be a big bad guy on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So saying yes and not being a dick, I guess, and being moderately talented is a good secret for an interesting life. That's my favorite thing about it is I could have made plans and I could have set goals, and I'm sure at times I did, but it seems silly because then you sort of miss whatever pops up in front of you. And it's an interesting career, right? I'm 52 years old, and I've never stopped working. I've always earned a living as an actor, but I have years that are going great, and I have years like, hope we make it, better get a show soon, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
How do you deal with that in your mind, knowing that you've constantly worked, but then you have to worry sometimes about getting a job? Like, it's like, it's if an accountant works for years and then they get fired from their job or the job ends, they go as a job as an accountant, and it's an interview process. It's auditioning, but it's something that they know, unless they screw up, they're going to be at that job for a while. How's it as an actor when you go in when you're not working? Do you get down on yourself? Do you try extra hard to nail that audition?
You're so good. These are really insightful questions, and you hit it directly. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge that you have as an actor is getting out of your own fucking way and getting out of your head. Because, if you know how it is, it's like in anything. If you want it, you're not getting it. You have to have a different way of approaching it. You have to go and do the work. And it's always about keeping your ego in check and having a healthy amount of confidence, but not being identified with success or trying, because the thing is, you can't control, as I tell young actors, I tell smart people, contemporary actors, younger actors, anyone I know, my wife, and try to tell myself every once in a while, they're going to cast the right person. You're going to, I can't change. I can't be more of a Johnny Depp type, or I can't be older, heavier, lighter, or shorter, taller. I can't change whoever I am. It has to be the right alchemy. And I think that's the only thing that I don't love about not going into the room is some of that alchemy gets lost. You can't sort of feel that transference of energy between two people, and they sort of get your essence. They're just seeing this tape of you playing the character. But it's the business. Yeah, I remember going to an audition probably right after I finished Homicide, and I look in the waiting room. They're not reading for the same part as I am, but in that waiting room, I see Charles Durning and John Polito. They're fucking Charles Durning and John Polito. They're established. They are who they are. And I said to the casting, I go, why are they here reading? Why are you making these guys read? But then I realized they were happy. I looked at their faces, and I'd worked with Charles, and I hadn't met John yet, but they were happy to be there. They got it. That's what it's about. A much smarter person than I, whose job was to keep my head straight. He always said, he goes, your Greek myth is Sisyphus, right? Every day you push, you got to push the rock up to the top of the hill. No matter how far you get it up the mountain, it's going to roll back down again, and you're going to have to roll it back up. And that's the nature of this. And it's certainly, it's exciting. It gives you certain muscles. And I think once you've pushed the rock back up enough times, you'll push it back up. Yes, of course. I would be lying to you if I don't wake up every once in a while in the middle and I go, maybe it's over. Maybe it's over. I'll have to come up with something else to do. But it isn't. And that's the challenge. It's and there's always something new. And but I have less sleepless nights than I used to. I know there will always be something to do, and as I always talk to younger actors now. I always say the most important thing you can do, which I'm trying, I've done as well, but certainly the business has changed dramatically. I mean, when I first got in this business, you needed a camera with film to shoot something, right? And now everyone's got a camera that's infinitely more flexible on their phone. So I'm always saying to people, make your own stuff, because I'm a gun for hire. I'm here to do your show, but you could tell the people how you want to be seen. So if you don't want to be doing kissy face, like I said, don't write yourself a part where you're not doing kissy face, and show us, and you can put it out. That's what's exciting about the world right now, is there's so many talented people out there, and it's so much more egalitarian and democratic in how you can get your product out there. So I certainly try to take my own medicine. I write and I put things together, but I'm lucky enough that the phone will ring and people will call, and also I gotta just kick myself in the ass and put together a good audition and win that part, which is exciting, because certainly the business has changed a lot, and you enter different age groups, and there might be less or more work. You just never know, based on the whims and what the public is watching and what they're into. And it's certainly, there's nothing worse than thinking you're owed something or getting bitter or thinking, you have to prove it. And so that's exciting. And in these strange times, I remember I felt this in the economic downturn in 2007, when people, as you said, you've been accountants their whole lives, and now they're out of work and they're looking for work. I gotta look for work all the time, and I have to pick myself back up. So I think about, there's so many, I follow so many sports figures, and I think about them, the psychology of the game. You've just lost a game, you got to go win the next one. Or David Goggins, his book. You follow someone who's like, you just got to pick yourself up, because someone was saying to me, a writer, at Thanksgiving, she was like, oh, they rejected my script, and I don't know. I'm like, I go, do you know how many times I've been kicked in the dick this week, and I have to still get back up and do it? It's like, yeah, you got kicked in the dick. It's okay. Just let's get back up. Let's do it, man, because no one cares. My kid doesn't. My kid's not going to eat if I'm like, oh, well, I don't have time for the pity party. You kind of got to learn the lesson and move on, and also know what's in your control. And I think that's the most that's one of the most challenging things as an actor when you're auditioning. What's in your control is who you are as a person and how you do your work. You can't be more right for something. You can't make yourself more right. You can't convince someone that you're right. When it's right, and when the music is there, you're the right guy. And so you just got to bring your A game. And it's a good philosophy for life, right? You want to try to show up every day and do your best. And yeah, some days you just don't feel it. Some days. But you got to.
Now, how do you think the industry is going to change with the coronavirus? How do you think, as no one knows when they're going to get back. I've talked to someone who said, well, we can't do live theater because you can't have a love scene. We can't do this. How do you think it's going to change? And then how do you plan to try to acclimate to that? Because once again, your life's going to be in a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, we're living through extraordinary times. We're living, and things are changing, but look, there's going to become a point where we can test for COVID, right? So if we're talking about that, there's going to become a moment where we're going to know if antibodies work. Already they've got the proposals about how we can go back on set, and people will be able to meet that, because certainly no one was in the mood. It was such a shock. That was such a shock. And then what we've gone through the last few weeks has been we're in very profound changing times. But no one wants to watch your Zoom TV show, right? It's not, that's not going to be, we're not going to be all shooting stuff remotely from our house. We'll go back to the theater. We're going to figure it out, because we're not going to watch videotapes in the theater. We'll figure out either how to social distance, or at a certain point you'll know. But the scary part for everyone, as we just said, I'm thinking about it. If you're an usher in a theater, if you run a theater, if you're selling concessions, we need to figure out a way to get back there sooner rather than later. I don't have the answer. I wish I did. Things that right now, auditioning is what it's been, right? So you're putting yourself on tape, so I can audition for stuff that maybe is going to happen, and they're talking about. Some of the shows that I'm looking at, they're talking about starting up in December, right?
Now, I'll just say, does that make it harder for you when you sit there and you audition for a show that might start in December? Does that make it a little harder to audition for the fact that it might not come to fruition? It's like a kid who's always hitting a heavy bag,
Yeah.
And he thinks one day he might get in the ring, but all of a sudden he never does. You've had a career, so when it gets up and running, you will work. Because you worked for your whole life. But is it hard when you sit there and you have to get prepare yourself mentally for a role, put it on your audition tape, have the tape, and then sit there and go, okay, I'm going to send this. And even if I get the part, I might not ever actually get the part.
Right, it may not happen, but that's it. I'm well versed in disappointment, right? Because it's just, every actor, 99% of the jobs, unless you've been fortunate enough to start off really young and you just go from offer to offer. For the most of us, for the working actors, it's you get less jobs than you don't, right? That's the ratio. That's the algorithm, right? That's the way it goes. That's the equation. So, yes, if I really wanted to go down that road and go, oh, this looks really daunting, but you kind of have to throw your hat over the wall and hope for the best. Because the other thing, if I could go, well, gosh, major stars aren't working right now because there's no show. They're probably going to want my job, right? It's certainly, as it always is, it's a buyer's market. And I think that inspires one to come up with other revenue streams, figure out other ways to be creative and to get it out there. But I may be deluded, but I'm super I'm not worried. I have great faith that everything will not get back to normal. It will go to something new, right? We're going through profound changes, right, in the world right now, and so many of them are incredibly positive. And we're gonna find something new at the end of this. I'm eating in, right?
Right.
but we're all eating in. Already, you saw like S.H.I.E.L.D put together those shows, and he's figured out a way to do concerts with socially distancing. We're smart. We'll figure things out. And then, the people right now you're worried about are, people who are compromised and won't be able to go to the theater right now. But the theater's coming back. We've been through pandemics before. We've been through tough times before. And I trust that we'll come out of this stronger. But yeah, it's crazy out there.
It's crazy. Anyway,
it's crazy.
I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, my God.
It's always fun to talk to you. It's been 6 years, and it's so funny. I go through this, like I said, when I talked to Paul Ben Victor 2 weeks ago. It was like 5 years. And all of a sudden, and then Abruzzo, 7 years. And it's like, holy shit, it was that long? And I go, oh, my God, it was. Because I look at it like this. I recorded in the studio. You're in the studio. And then I had to record at my place in L.A. for a little bit. Then I moved back here 3 years ago. So all of a sudden I go, holy crap. And then, of course, you guys have all worked and you've gotten different parts and you've gone on. So it's just one of those things, it's just cool. So I want to thank you for coming on.
It's always a pleasure. I love talking to you.
Now, do you still tweet? Are you still on Twitter?
I've taken a bit of a Twitter break, just because it's a little bananas out there right now. But it was just, I don't think anyone needs to hear from me right now. I don't think I have anything for the conversation at the moment. I'm waiting. I'm trying to learn a little more so I can participate in a slightly more constructive way.
Good. Well, could people just go on IMDb and look up? Reed Diamond.
I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at Reed Diamond Presents, and I'm going to post some pretty pictures soon, and I'll be back on Twitter. Where I thought I need to leave the space available for people who had a lot to say.
That's good. Well, so people follow Reed. Check out Reed. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Cooper Talk. Follow me on Instagram at Cooper Talk 1. My website, coopertalk.net. You can find 800 episodes up there. Also, email me, cooper@coopertalk.net, and I'll get back to you. So, people, have a great day. Be safe. I'm Steve Cooper. I was only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Awesome.